Hello everyone and welcome back to the My Generation podcast. Happy New Year. Thank you very much for tuning into the podcast over the last 6 months. It's been an absolute roller coaster. I've enjoyed every minute of bringing this incredible podcast content to you. And to celebrate going into 2020, first I just wanted to ask, what are some of your New Year's resolutions? What do you want to do? What do you want to change and update in your life? Let us know in the comments. We'll address them in future episodes of the podcast. I aim to apply all of the feedback you've been giving over the past few months on the Facebook page, Twitter, and on the YouTube comments below as well for the podcast, so we know what you want to see in the future of this show. Thank you very much. I've loved sharing some truly fascinating stories over the past few months, and what I wanted to do to celebrate the year anniversary of the podcast is I wanted to go back to where it all began at the beginning and just give some more context to some of the earlier episodes and do a best of. So I'm going to do a best of for the first 15 episodes of the My Generation podcast. Talk a little bit more about each of the individual episodes, who the guests are, how I know them, how the podcast got going in the first place, and then we're going to play sort of 5, maybe 10 minutes from each of those episodes. Maybe also play a little bit of music as well, so you get a little bit of everything with this podcast. I hope you had an absolutely amazing Christmas as well. You can tune in to the Christmas special that just went up last week with Daniel Inwood. It's been absolutely amazing, especially to talk to Dan. He's an incredible guest we've had on the show many times, as you'll hear in this episode, as well as many others. But if you take it all the way back to the beginning, the 6th of June 2019, we introduced the My Generation podcast.
Hello everybody and welcome to the My Generation podcast. I'm here today with Daniel Inwood from Canterbury, and we are going to be talking about social detoxing on today's show. So recently I went to Brighton for a social media detox to give me new surroundings, experiment with life away from my smartphone, and think about what I want to do with my work. And I love the experience. So today I wanted to ask Dan what he has to say about social detoxing. So, hello Daniel, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Good afternoon.
Yeah, nice to see you, and thank you to Canterbury Christchurch for letting us use their facilities to record this.
Absolutely, we are here in the Powell building, so yeah, a big shout out to Canterbury Christchurch University for allowing us to make use of their wonderful new modern facilities.
Yeah. So, regarding social media, Dan, where do you sit? And is there anything to do with your work or anything that involves social media?
I'm a fairly heavy viewer of social media. I wouldn't say that I'm a great big interactor with a lot of the social media platforms out there. I'm predominantly most present on Facebook and Instagram.
And why specifically Facebook and Instagram, do you think?
Instagram in particular has a very, very easy format for me because I like to look at the stories that people put up, and I like to look at these little snapshots of what's going on. And I find that all of the extra bits on Facebook, all of the connectivity and all of the groups, different types of posts, things that have been shared, reshared, shared again, all of the different types of comments that people leave in different formats is all well and good. But if I'm looking for just a quick snapshot, I want a pretty picture to look at while I've got 10 seconds left of my lunch. I think Instagram fills that niche really nicely.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sharing, actually, later on in the show, we also cover a local musician, and in this podcast we're going to be covering Hounding from Canterbury, so stay tuned later in the podcast for that. But back to Dan and Facebook and Instagram.
But then I'm quite conscious of this sort of dissonance that comes up where what people put forward on social media tends to be the highlight reel. It tends to be the parts that they really particularly want you to see, whether it's because they're just so happy or because they're showing off or they're proud of what's going on at the time. They're really enjoying themselves, which is great, but that might be a small percentage of your life. You know, you don't get engaged every day. You don't go rock climbing in Chile every day. You don't see a beautiful sunset out by the beach every day. And I'm quite aware of this sort of cognitive dissonance that goes on between what Facebook is trying to show me with the most liked and the most influential posts, and what I think that person's life is like. And I feel like there's a giant disconnect between the lives that people put forward on social media and the lives that they lead.
So Dan has been a friend of mine for a while now. If you listen to that episode, you'll remember we met on a social media app called Meetup, which I still use to this day. It's an amazing way of meeting people within your city. It's just quality. And we talked a lot about social media detoxing because a month before I recorded this episode, I went away for a few days just in Brighton on my own and had an amazing time. It's an experience I'd definitely like to do again in some regard. It was very eye-opening and very much something I needed. And social media has always been a topic I've been very interested in. If you've tuned into my birthday episode on the 12th of December, you will have heard all about that. And so me and Dan had an amazing chat about social media detoxing. Probably our most serious episode, because since then both of us have sort of loosened up on the podcast for sure and become much more free in how we talk and what we talk about, because in this episode it felt very much like we were just talking very rigidly, but that was almost by design. We made it feel like a bit more of an interview, and the podcast has definitely morphed and changed a little bit since this opening episode. We recorded this just in the studio at Canterbury Christ Church University, which I still use to record some of the podcasts today, although where I record the episodes is often very different. So if you listen to the episode with Joel, which came out on the 19th of December, that one was recorded in his forge, so the sound quality is definitely very different. This is also the first time, I believe, maybe second now, of hearing this lapel mic being used on the podcast. I'm using an XLR-powered lapel mic going into my H4n Pro handy recorder. And I don't know if this is the first time you're hearing this, but it'd be very interesting to hear what you think about the sound quality. But back to Dan. So when we first began the podcast, we were really thinking, well, I want a guest who can talk that I know I'm going to be able to bounce off of for about an hour's time of recording. And me and Dan go way back, and he was very much the first person who showed interest when I initially spoke at social gatherings about the idea of bringing out a podcast. I always wanted to do it just to be able to share the stories of the people of Kent. I was very unsure as to whether I would gain any traction with guest bookings. I wasn't sure, and this will actually be a bit clearer more towards the end of these 15 episodes, but I felt fine for sort of the first 5 or 10, and I was really worried that I was going to sort of not have as many people interested in coming on and speaking, but this was really managed to get the ball rolling, and eventually lots more people wanted to come on and speak, and it was actually quite amazing that so many people wanted to come on and share so many different stories. And I know I certainly found out a lot about Dan, and he shared that beautiful poem at the end of the episode. And when he said that and we wrapped up the first episode of the podcast, I knew this was something I really, really wanted to do and carry on with. So moving into the second episode of the podcast, Harry Monday. He is a university student and a friend of mine. We're in the same class, me and Harry. We talked about collecting and materialism because I'm quite a big Lego collector, and I've always been griping with my collecting as to how strong a thing it is in my life, what I like to collect, and why Lego is so important to me. And I know that Harry's big on his DVDs, pop vinyls, and we just had an incredibly nice chat about that. Harry isn't so much of a radio person himself, but he was very happy and open to talk, and it's a subject that he was passionate about, so he was able to get quite a bit off about this. This was right at the end of term from what I remember when we recorded this. So Harry obviously lives in East Sussex. So this was right before he was going back home for summer that we managed to record this last couple of days. But it was a really, really fun chat. And here are the highlights from that episode.
Because how big Lego is, it's really, you want to find it, it's there in front of you already. And just finding those ones that you wanted was just that much more easier. So you were able to pick the ones that really caught your eye, that you really enjoyed more, which is why I went for the ninja ones, because me being a little 8 or 9 year old, I was just like, oh, people with swords, that's cool. And I just went from there on.
Is that how old Ninjago is? How long has Ninjago been going for then? Because I thought it was more of a recent theme.
It's kept going quite recently from what I've heard. I'm embarrassed to say, but I still check in every now and then just to see what the sets look like. But I believe, I could be wrong, but I know little 8 or 9-year-old me was fascinated with men with swords. It still caught my eye even before it came out then.
Yeah, so you've been collecting obviously for quite a while. And did your social circle, were they quite the same as you? Did they also collect Lego?
Not the same. They were into other collections, which I'll probably talk about in a minute, but my close group of friends at that time weren't that big on Lego. They were more Pokemon and all that, which I did also get into.
Yeah, so you got cards. There's a lot of things for a kid to collect, aren't there?
Yeah, surprisingly enough, I got Pokemon cards as hand-me-downs to my brother as well.
Yeah. And then would you obviously you'd have his collection, but then you'd build off of that to your own?
Oh yeah, I'd always add my own little bits to try and improve it, you know. So I always set my dominance as the better brother.
And go back to him with, look at how much more I've added.
Just go back, look, I organised your cards, I'm that much better.
So this is probably the most horrible question, really, then. What to you does collecting mean? Because the reason I thought of this question to talk about as a topic was collecting can obviously feel quite freeing because you're spending your money your way and you're able to build up this thing. Like you said, in your room, you've got it all displayed nicely how you want it.
I had to be very smart when it got to the point where I was making my own money about it. Because it's all fun having pocket money because you can save up for whatever you want because you haven't got to worry about buying food or going out to meet people. But when it got to that point, so when I had to slow down the Lego I was buying and all that, yeah, it took me, because they released those Lego sets every 6-month waves. I had to slow down to the point where I was taking a year or two to just catch up on 6 months worth of Lego.
Yeah, the waves of Lego, they come so fast because for every theme, it's just relentless, isn't it?
Which I gotta give mad respect to Lego for just having that much effort and time to keep pumping out all these Ranger sets and just continually keep going with them, especially the Star Wars ones. Yeah,
there's new Star Wars sets every couple of months.
Oh yeah, they always like to outdo themselves with making one giant set as well.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen the UCS Millennium Falcon, the large one, haven't you?
Oh yeah, the 600-pound one.
I think it's 650. It's even
650.
more.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's an expensive one. I know someone who's got it, and I mean, part of that, what he loves is the bragging right. Like, obviously, he loves showcasing his Lego and building it and everything. It comes with a massive bragging right. You said you had it with the helicarrier.
Yeah, that was. No, it's hard knowing someone out there has topped me on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I gotta get that set now, just to brag to them.
Yeah. And as more adult collectors, like me, you have to plan that into a budget, really, don't you? How much you can actually set aside every month or every year just for Lego.
Oh, yeah. I think I had to set aside quite a bit of money for the helicarrier one because I was £300 and I had to be very careful with my money after that.
Yeah.
I more or less bought that as a mad birthday shopping spree.
Yeah, and it's probably quite a centerpiece as well because I know obviously with Lego, you as an adult collector can just get 1 or 2 sets and have them as centerpieces, which is what my other friend does. But you had more of the Ninjago stuff, quite a large display. Is there anything else that you've collected through childhood or currently?
Well, I can definitely say I've got a collection of DVDs that has gone quite large recently, but as a child I collected the Japanese toys Bakugan.
Oh, yes.
People remember those, yeah.
Yeah, I remember
little
Bakugan.
Spinning balls that would open up and be little monsters.
So remind me really of what Bakugan was, because I only really heard it in whispers.
Oh, it was sort of like Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you just have a bunch of cards, but then they'll mix up with little cards with magnetic. They had a little sheer metal put in between 2 bits of card. And you place this little plastic ball on it that had magnetic sensors in it. And when you landed on it just right, it would open up in all these weird ways, like bits would just fold out of each other. You could flick bits up to be like horns and all that, but they would all resemble these little monsters.
And we're actually going to be getting Harry back on the podcast. He's going to be talking about swimming, because he used to be a swimming teacher, of all things, isn't it? Just the craziest things that people do. And I adore Harry. He's a great friend of mine, and we've worked on plenty of film projects together now. By the time you're hearing this, pre-recording this a little bit, but we would have, over the Christmas period, been working on tons of film projects. It's the reason I'm pre-recording this little bit, because over Christmas, November, December time, we're making so much stuff. So hopefully be able to also share in the new year what we've been making as a class group, and hopefully address it in the swimming episode, maybe even. If there's any questions you've got for me and Harry relating to filmmaking and what that's like, as we're both film students, feel free to drop them in the comments. There's plenty of room for you to drop any and all comments from today's episode. Next, moving on to episode number 3, we had Joe Toomey, who came on to talk about sport and community. And this was a really, really important episode for me in terms of the podcast, because Joe is a former radio presenter. He presented on CSR, as did episode 20 guest George, who talked about his storytelling, and indeed Mimi, who talked about her radio drama. All of them are former CSR presenters who've just got, or well, actually Mimi's a current CSR presenter, and they've all got such a passion and a lust for radio and audio and speaking. So Joe was really the first guest to come on who had done this before. We were talking about mental health within the sport context, which encouraged me to do episode 6 with Connor, where we spoke in more depth about mental health within sport. But Joe had something really important and touching to say sort of halfway through the podcast here, that about something very personal to him that he felt comfortable opening up on the podcast about.
I used to enjoy swimming a lot. But I remember when I was a bit younger, because I've got something that's called they either call it a pigeon chest or a funnel chest. And there might be a couple of people listening to this who have it. It's more common in guys, and usually it happens when you have very fast growth spurts. Yeah. And it used to be something that I was okay with. But in school, people kind of were like, "What's that? Why have you got a hole there?" And so I was like, I'd be trying to change quite quickly in school because I just didn't really like the comments.
Yeah.
But then, and also in school, when we did swimming, no one was saying anything. But because I'd had those guys like saying it, I was it put me off swimming. So, but luckily, I had a swimming pool when I was growing up, so I actually really enjoyed swimming. Then, and I had I remember having a swimming pool party once or twice, which was nice. So.
Yeah, swimming's a great one that kind of goes under the radar.
And when I realised that Joe was comfortable sharing this with me on the podcast and sharing it with you, the people, first of all, it was just a massive honour that he was so open on the show with us here. But it taught me that there are people with very ordinary people with very incredible stories that just need to be shared. I think I realised in that moment that every single person has some very interesting story to share with us. Next on the show we had Cleo. She was talking about theatre writing. We met at a theatre writing group, me and Cleo, and as a result we both got to know each other very well, because when you share creative ideas you tend to get to know the people around you very well. And Cleo had some great ideas for plays, and we talked a lot about the creative process, as you'll see here.
Well, as with all good things, it was pointed out to me by my mum. And I'd been in drama productions at school and in other companies, other local companies as well. But I hadn't really done any of that for a good few years. So my mum saw this writing workshop and she said, would you like to try your hand at it? And I thought because there's always been this really interesting dichotomy between sort of who owns the character, like the writer, the playwright, or the actor who's executing the performance. And obviously they bring their own interpretation, and some playwrights and writers are more lenient about sort of relinquishing control of their characters than others. But yeah, I've always thought that that's a really interesting dynamic to sort of explore. And where I'd been an actor as such, I thought it would be exciting to see the other side of it.
I came, more from writing. I haven't done much acting, but I think it is interesting because in theatre, comparing to film, which I've written for as well, theatre, the actors have a lot more control. than in film for sure, because it's sort of a director's vision in film, but in theatre you give the script to the actors and then you allow them to sort of play with the script, have their own little workshops away from it. So it's quite different. I've been in theatre productions as a kid, but nothing major, luckily. But yeah, so you got into it through acting, and how does it now compare to being behind the page, behind the pen? What generates your ideas? What gets you writing?
Well, that is the thing, actually. Those are two separate questions. What generates ideas? I get ideas from all sorts of things, really. Like, I remember for a piece that I once did for our group, I don't know if you were there to like review it, but I did it about a drug smuggling pigeon. Okay. And it was just because I'd been sitting in the Westgate Gardens and had seen a pigeon walk past. Yeah. So it can be something as small as that, or it can be, you know, wanting to think about a certain relationship dynamic or whatever. Ideas big and small. That's where ideas come from. What gets me writing? I am lazy. So that is a totally different question altogether. Yeah. And I'll often have to sort of haul myself off and give myself an hour to just think and to write and to edit and just to sort of spew it all out as a sort of form of creative therapy, I'd say. So
do you write down your ideas beforehand? You have like a journal that you note ideas in, and then you put aside that time and go for it and get them all out?
Yeah, a lot of the time I'll go through life and have ideas on my phone, in the notes on my phone, as I think is more common for sort of writers in the modern day, you know, because it's just so easy. And then I'll give myself sort of a block of time, go on my notes and say, right, I've got these 3 mini ideas, you know, I'll try and write a bit for each of them, and, you know, 2 might fall away and I'm left with one that looks like it could be something a bit longer. Yeah. I guess theatre as a whole can be seen as a kind of therapy for everyone involved, really. Like, yes, it is very stressful as well, you know, anyone who's ever been in a theatre production will understand that. But it's a therapy for the writer in writing. It's therapy for those who maybe aren't swayed towards writing, you know, because they can act. Like, in acting is definitely a very physical form of sort of release and therapy. And, you know, audiences go to be entertained and to let off some steam. I just think it is... I think therapy is the right word for it. I don't know.
And we both had small pieces put on at the Marlow Kit and Studio respectively, and we've both gone our own ways with it. I felt quite informed about the theatre writing processes. I've taken more of an audio and broadcast approach to my life, and she's stayed within that theatre world. It was very much nice for me to jump back into something so personal. Moving on to episode 5, this was the first time I did an episode on my own, and I wasn't too sure how it would go going into it. Like, obviously now this episode I'm quite comfortable talking just on my own, but for episode 5 I still felt like I needed to bounce off something, and I feel for every episode it's very important, no matter what I do, to get other voices in. And this is when I started to encourage the comments that people could leave on the podcast. So whether they be via Facebook or in the YouTube comments below, or I get people to try and even send some small sound bites in, or just having another voice in some way, just for me to bounce off of, choosing a subject, and because that's really what I want to do with this show. I don't want it to just be me. I want maybe some episodes where I talk about a personal story as well. In fact, we're getting Joe Finnegan back on the podcast, who we did the Halloween special with. He's going to be talking about a passion project that he did, and I'm also going to be mentioning a passion project that I did as well over the course of a year, and he's going to be talking about his. So we're going to bounce off each other for very personal stories, and you're going to get to know quite a bit about me with that. Same with when I did my episode about my photography. But for this, I really still wanted to keep bouncing off of what other people had to say. So I wanted people's comments on the first episode of the podcast, and we focused the comments around social media detoxing, whether it's a good thing. And here are just some of my favourite moments from messages I read out and comments I made within this episode.
Even if you don't take a break from social media, or even if you don't want to, it's still worth trying just to see what that life is like, because you get a much more different perspective. I feel like when I took a break from social media, I was a lot more aware of what was around me. I went to Brighton, obviously, to social media detox, and
when I came back, I feel like I had a more vivid image of Brighton than I would have if I didn't. And I don't feel like other places in and around it I'm as keyed in with because I have my phone. Whereas with Brighton, I was able to take in everything, all 5 senses, and I've gained a lot more. I wrote some of my thoughts on my trip to Brighton. I just had a much more vivid paintbrush than I usually have with most places, and I even sometimes feel I have with my own city. I'm in Canterbury here at the moment, and because I just go around the city on autopilot now, because I know it so well, there are certain little nuggets of gold within the city that I feel like I might not be as aware of because I'm going around with a phone or distraction, or because I've been here so long I think I know the city, but there's always something new to uncover in Canterbury, and I don't know about wherever you are right now, but there probably is too, even if it's not a city. The next point was from Stephen. He had said, "My friend just recently gave up on all social media. He said it was because it takes his focus away from things he wants to achieve, too distracting. I need it for work, but hardly use it outside of that." And I think that that's a very valid way of using social media. I know that for me, I only use it for the most part, especially Facebook, for work and talking to friends. Because when you're constantly looking at everyone else's highlights, Dan used the term that everyone uploads their highlight reels to Instagram, it can sometimes get a bit downing when you see that everyone else's lives are so manicured and perfect, even though they're not. Everyone's got their own problems to be dealing with. Everyone's got their things, their things that's going on, their baggage, and it doesn't come across on social media like they do. And you can definitely manicure it to make it look a lot better than it might actually be. And I know I'm guilty of that, but I also feel that there is a certain amount of the person will see a post, see you having fun, and might be saddened by it because they obviously want to long for something as good as that. Maybe you've just gone out somewhere quite nice and the person who's viewing it really wanted to be there. And it could put them down, or it could inspire them to go there. They might just be happy for you. And in some cases it tends to be both. I think it's kind of a grey area where someone might see a post and be like, I'm quite happy for that person, but I wish I was there too. Or I wish my life was this interesting too. And so the complexities of that and how much focus that takes away from you, I can understand why someone might want to completely drop it for everything except work, actually. And in fact, the very next comment from Tom after that was, yes, I should take a break from the social media because I should be working right now. And I posted this question whilst during 9 to 5 regular work hours, just kind of to see what would happen. I was on a lunch break just to see what would be the response and whether I'd be able to get any comments during work hours. And most of them did, because I feel like social media is something you can just dip into, especially if you also use it for work. As I know, I mentioned in the first episode, I sort of use Facebook Messenger like emails now, where I respond to people about events, other work meetings, booking guests for this show, other jobs. I find it quite a good place. And Jack, the next comment, agrees with me. Jack says, social media for me is crucial. My work uses it to update us on new procedures. All of my group projects at uni have required at least some use of social media group chats. I don't find social media distracting from my life or focus away from what I'm doing, as I don't use it frequently.
And then moving on from this, we went into the mental health in sport episode with Connor Jenkins. And Connor, I knew because I met him on a radio drama that I did with Mimi, who we later got on the podcast. And Connor was absolutely lovely. And he's within his society of rock climbing. He's the social secretary. He's got a big role within the society. And hearing him come on and be, again, like Joe did with sport, very honest and open about his journey, shows that even the people quite high up within what they do, there's a journey to that. No one gets to that confidence from nowhere. And Connor had a proper journey, and here's just some of the nicest stuff that he said that we could all take away, and I certainly did, in terms of improving my confidence and improving confidence, especially if you're moving to a new place or a new city and you're trying to break into that lifestyle in the new location?
I used to go out by myself quite a lot. I used to read I read a guide on how to go out by yourself. How sad is that?
Yeah, everyone has a different way.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with the pub by yourself, but that's not what we're here to talk about.
But
yeah,
no, it's all relevant, isn't it? Because you started off with that, and you were longing for more of a social life,
Definitely,
and then and that was a part of the key in.
Yeah,
really.
absolutely. I mean, I don't go a day without texting at least 3 or 4 people on my team. It's a family. I mean, I call it my family. It's a very cliche thing, but it is definitely my the people I see every day, people I talk to every day, people I get along with every day. I'm actually moving in with 2 guys, a guy and a person. Actually, no, this is where it all kind of blends into each other. Okay, so I joined the team last year, and in this year's new members, I met one of my best friends, Lily, and they joined up, and they're one of the people that improved like leaps and bounds. They actually won an award. We have the Climies, which we give out twice a year, and they won an award for most improved last Christmas, which is fantastic. I'm very happy for them. And then I convinced my friend from back home, Morgan, to join up the team. And Morgan's a very small place, not much to do. But since then, he's like made all these friends as well, and then we hang out together all the time. It's great to see that. And now me, Morgan, and Lily are all moving in together, like in 3 weeks from now. So it's like it's such a close bond we all have, and I love it. I mean, obviously, this can't go broadcast on the internet or anything. They can't know how much I actually like them. But this is not being recorded, right?
Yeah. no mic in the room.
I'm joking. But yeah, it's just it's a really great sense of community. I mean, obviously that comes with every society at university, but this is the one for me. It's just about finding that common ground with people, isn't it? And when you find that, then it's just the rest writes itself, Now,
for episode 7, I didn't mention how I met Emma. Me and Emma met because when I used to do my theatre writing, as discussed in the episode with Cleo, I always liked to book a day or 2 out a week. And it quite often fell that Thursdays, back when I used to do a lot of theatre writing, sort of when I was 16, Thursdays were my day off of the week. And I would basically go and write in a coffee shop, and I went all around the city looking for coffee shops to just go and sit and write in one day a week. And I eventually settled on the coffee shop that Emma worked at, just because it was also a cross with an interior design shop, and my mum would go there all the time buying stuff, and I would be able to sit in there. And it was quite quiet when I first started going as well, so it was a bit tucked out of the way, nice drinks, calm atmosphere. But because it was quite quiet when I first went, because they'd only just put the coffee shop bit in, so people didn't know yet. Now it's really busy and booming and full of life. But I would get talking to the staff there. Emma was one of the staff, and I got to find out that she was massive on film photography. And I knew that she was going on some trips, and I just had to get her on to talk about why film specifically. And she, amongst other people in my life, managed to get me interested in taking photos on 35mm film. I know a few people who do take photos on film cameras, and it was great to see that from her. She showed me examples of some of her work, and when she did, I knew I had to get her on the show. She was initially quite shy when she spoke to me, but then, as you'll hear in the section, which I'll play in a moment, she was very confident once you actually got her talking about the subject she loved. So here is a part of what Emma had to say about her film photography.
For example, I was recently in Tokyo last year, and literally the pictures you want to take are nightlife there. Like, you're just going to have the best pictures, but a lot of them came out very dark and grainy, but where the lighting was penetrating through the city light, the pictures were still coming up, but it was like I feel like that would have been of my balance. Like, I feel like I couldn't have gone darker than that.
Yeah.
Unless there is like a light that I'm directing the image at. But there have been some really, really bad failed ones that have come out. So I feel like the cameras all around tend to be pretty decent with distance.
Yeah.
It's just they're very, very sensitive to light.
And why do you use a film camera as opposed to a digital camera, or just your phone?
I don't know. I used to have, like, do you know that stupid app Fuji Film? Alright,
Paint a picture.
Yeah, I'm not dissing anyone that uses it, but a lot of people use it for the aesthetics of how pictures come out.
Yeah.
and I believe it's meant to be like a 35 mil sort of like looking
Oh, okay.
phone app, but I've actually got a different one on my phone which is called 1998 film.
1998 film.
Yeah, so like it's called 1998 cam.
Yeah.
And the pictures so you will look at the camera,
Yeah.
and when you take it, it loads it up,
Yeah.
etc. But it comes out like a bit differently, so the colours get a bit distorted and
Yeah.
stuff. And
So
a
it's
bit hazy,
imitating the look.
basically. And I overused this way too much,
Yeah.
like so much last year, and it was one of those like when I went to Tokyo, the people that I went with, they were all like kind of film people. They like a few of them took film cameras with them, and I just kind of jumped on the bandwagon. But it's more so I just like. I don't know, I like this film look, and also it stops me spamming my pictures so much. I find that when I take a nice picture, I'm like, I need to post it straight away. I get a bit ahead of myself, and I'm not one really for social media anyway. Like sometimes I can be on it all the time, but then other times I need to get away.
Yeah.
And I think with film, it's kind of brought me into the waiting game of actually respecting media, like social media a bit more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just respecting photography in general, because my creativity, I'm very it's a painting. I'm very like, that's it. There'll be not much else that I have to say about the matter.
Yeah.
And I don't like that side of me. I like to be pushed into corners like where I can actually do different things and not just be so like, that's a picture.
Now, going into episode 8. Episode 8, unfortunately, the sound quality was not good in hindsight. I recorded down by the river, recorded the episode on my phone, and the river was just too loud. I do apologise again for the sound quality within that episode, but I choose to leave it up because, first of all, I still feel it shows the journey of the podcast and how far we've come from and gone to. But I think there is still a lot in that episode to be gained because I really enjoyed the topic. When I put out on the Facebook page asking for people's opinions on films, I got so many responses, so many, and eventually I wasn't even able to share all of them. I had that many, and it was amazing just how personal some people felt about films that changed them. And I got so many unique voices in this episode, and I'm just going to play you a couple of the clips from when I got messages sent to me. I'll keep this one a little bit shorter, but here are some of the films that changed the people of Kent. So, the first ones that I would like to go through for me, first example is a movie called The Place Beyond the Pines, which I saw yesterday, which partially gave me the inspiration to start recording this here for you today. The Place Beyond the Pines was a beautiful, beautiful movie, and it surprised me, it caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting to like it so much, especially after the first 45 minutes. It felt like quite a safe movie, quite a good movie, but quite a safe one, and it just hit home. There was something about the wanting to redeem a bad act and how sometimes getting too involved in something can actually prove detrimental. Because obviously it follows Ryan Gosling's character, who is he's just figured out that he has a son that he didn't know he'd had with a woman during a fling he'd had the previous year. And when having this moment, he decides to stay and try to fix things, tries to make things better. But as a result, ends up making life a lot worse for not just him, but the people around him. And it's how the film spirals out of control because of the decisions he and the people around him made. And also pure passion, father-son passion, a longing to care, and how sometimes caring doesn't always have the intended results. I also saw a movie called The Fountain somewhat recently. I talk about this movie a lot with people, so if you know me in real life, you know how much I love The Fountain. It's a great movie that will teach you a lot about life and love. Its key messages are about how fighting death isn't necessarily the way to go, and how actually sometimes it's about embracing it, about how death creates new life, and how it's not just a bad thing. Another movie I saw which was good was called Her. It's by Spike Jonze, starring Joaquin Phoenix. Came out in 2013. Again, taught me a lot about how love can mean different things to different people, what truly is love, what we value as love, how generationally the direction we're moving in with love, it poses some incredible questions. And the last movie I wanted to talk about here is Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance, which taught me a lot about passion and career drive. So I'm a playwright as well, and a lot of this movie is centered around bringing something to life on stage. It's about bringing something to life on stage and what that means to the people involved, and how obsession to produce and put something out can lead to someone's downfall, how you can go too far, but also how passion and drive is so important. The protagonist is successful throughout the movie because he is passionate, but then it's how it affects his family as well, how he can neglect sometimes the people around him and the negative consequences. And it taught me that even when I am deeply involved in my work, that I should always watch out for the people around me, and that a work and family and social balance is actually very important. Episode 9 now, this was one I was looking forward to recording. Mike Hugh, I met him at a public speaking class. I used to do Toastmasters in Canterbury. I haven't done that as much recently because the podcast and broadcast stuff I've done has been also my way of still being able to engage with audio and creation and talking in podcasts. And I knew that Mike was moving away, and he mentions in the podcast that he was moving away, but I know that he was big on solo travelling, which is something that I wanted to do, but I was always very scared of the idea of, and my social media detox was the only time I ever even came close to it. But Mike has been all over the world travelling, and his stories have been absolutely fascinating.
The mass media might think about solo travelling and how it might be a sort of a dangerous thing to do when you're by yourself and no one to look after. So since I've been to so many different places around the world, I feel like I can just be open and I can just be super transparent and smiley and friendly to people, and it reciprocates. And I feel like when you're like that and you take that attitude with traveling by yourself, you can meet so many people. So when I went to San Francisco, I stayed at that person's place. I didn't know him before, and yeah, we clicked. And because we clicked so well, he took me to his friend's place. We went to his friend's offices, and that's when it expands, because once you meet their friends, it just keeps on carrying on.
Yeah. And so the couch surfing is the focal point of it, though. So you bridge out from that person, and they show you the surrounding area. So I don't know too much about. You said it's an app.
Yep.
So people post that you can stay in their room and that they're going to show you around. And I imagine you've got to be like certified on the app or something. Could you paint a picture for how you'd use it?
Yeah. So what couchsurfing is? It's a mobile app. So what you do is you sign up, you put all your details in, your age, your location, what you're about, a little profile, a little biography. So I'm Mike, I'm 22, I like the gym, I like studying, I like working out, And then you put the countries you've been to and the countries you want to visit and what languages you're fluent at. And when you're requesting to stay at someone's house, you sort of write a little introduction about yourself and why you want to stay there. So pretty much can travel and do it in any country. So in San Francisco, for example, there was 100,000 hosts.
Wow.
100,000. And I know in London there's over 200,000. So you've got that many people to stay with, and the great thing is it's completely free.
So the app's completely free?
Yeah.
Do you have to pay to stay at the house?
So it's completely free. You don't have to pay to stay at the house. The only thing is to increase your chances of being hosted, you have to pay a small membership fee of £50, but that's lifetime. You don't necessarily have to do that, but it makes you more legit because people see you investing in the app, in the sort of community. Because couchsurfing is essentially a community. Like, everyone trusts each other because you need some level of trust for some randomer to stay at your house, right?
Yeah, and I imagine it goes both ways. So you see someone who you want to stay at, you want to see that they've got a 5-star page that everyone's recommended that they're good to stay with.
Yeah.
And because then both of you feel safe letting each other in. Is that the
exactly?
reason?
Yeah, and I forgot to mention, so every time you stay at someone's house, you write a review. So if you had a bad experience, for example, you could write, "Oh, Mike, I'm not staying with him again.
Yeah.
He's this and that." don't recommend him. But if we had a really good time, they could say like, Michael's this and that, and I would love to host him again. And future hosts can see that and they'll be like, oh, okay, he's actually a cool person. I would vibe with him.
And then next on the podcast, Eleanor. She came on to talk about theatre and performance. So we had Cleo on talking about theatre, but in a more writing context. And then Eleanor brought the on-stage action. And this was one of the episodes that actually encouraged me to join the Drama Society for my university, which I've, at this point, been attending now for 6 or 7 months. I'm actually in the new year, at the end of January, we're going to be getting 3 people from the Drama Society on, including the president of the society. On the 23rd of January, they'll be on talking with us about what it's like being involved in the Drama Society, what they do, how you can get involved. We're also getting the social secretary and one of the actors also involved in the society. That'll be Alara, James and Enna. Very, very excited to record that episode with them. And this will be the first episode, actually, where we're going to have multiple guests. Please do let me know if that's something you want more of on the podcast. It's definitely different. I'm very excited to record it. Getting multiple voices within the same show. Let me know what you think of that one. But for now, we spoke to Eleanor. I met her through a acting project. So through Mimi's radio drama that I did, I met someone called Edie. Edie needed help with a project up at her university, at the University of Kent, and I came along and met Eleanor, who was very big on her acting. She's in so much, very productive actress, and I learned a lot about theatre and performance in that one. Here's just a clip of some of the stuff that she's been up to.
And I think for me, and this has always been when I've been acting, I haven't been nervous on stage. It's just the anticipation of waiting to go on stage. For example, when I was in Coraline, which was in March last year, so this was the first show I did acting wise for T24. I didn't come on until like 20-25 minutes into the show, and I remember sitting in the dressing room just feeling really, really nervous.
Yeah.
But kind of once I was on stage, I wasn't me anymore. I was the character I was playing, which is something I've always had when I've gone on stage. I've gone, okay, I'm not Eleanor anymore. This is who I'm playing. This is what she's feeling, and the scene, this is what she's doing. And
what I liked about the Ace Face is that you were pretty much, everyone was pretty much on stage for most of the time.
We were, yes.
So it was quite a full-on piece, because it was quite a long one, but it meant that you were always changing characters. So you said that you find you sort of cut out of just your regular mode of being Eleanor and going into a role.
Yeah.
How is that like being in an ensemble then, where you have to constantly keep changing who you are on stage?
I think for me, kind of preparing kind of beforehand helps. So for my different characters, I came up with names for them. I thought about what they'd been doing in the day and why they were there at the scenes they were. So, for example, my rocker character, I said that my name's Tara, and this was a girl who was a tomboy. She liked rocking out, like hanging out with the boys, being on the motorbike, and being with her kind of it would have been my onstage boyfriend, Darius. And then for my policeman, for example, I decided that my name was Lorna, and I'd been a police officer for 5 years, but absolutely hated the job. I came up with a list of reasons why.
But you had a good cop, bad cop thing, didn't you? Where they had the cop that was really nice to everyone, and then you, who was just like the aggressive one. I think that's good though. I know when I'm a writer, I always name every character, even if they're side characters.
Yeah.
But I know people at my theatre group who don't even name their main characters, and that baffles me. And I couldn't do that. But
it just gives you like a lot of purpose, and it kind of helps to keep you kind of within that sort of frame where it keeps you in, it keeps you focused. And
so is this something you've done for everything you do, even non-ensemble work, where you build a backstory away from the script?
Yeah, that's something I always kind of like to do. So for my Shakespeare's theatre performance, which was one of the modules at Kent, we had to come up with an original piece using lines from Shakespeare. So me and my friend Andy, who was playing my onstage husband, we kind of came up with like a backstory of how our characters like met, how our families kind of knew each other. And
that's cool.
I think we all kind of found it helpful, really, because it really helps us to kind of build our characters. And that's something I've also been exploring through putting together the Merry Wives of Windsor for the Canterbury Shakespeare Festival.
And is that your next upcoming thing? Whereabouts
Yes.
is that?
It's going to be on a house on Tyler Hill on the 1st to the 3rd of August.
Oh, nice. So is it? It's at the Tyre House.
Yeah,
and
so-
is that open to the public?
Well, on those dates it is being open to the public. It's owned by a lady called Mary, who's very nice. She's kind of one of the sort of patrons of the university. And
Now, episode 11 is an episode that it strikes close to home. It's meditation. I spoke to Shami about it. Shami's a good friend, another one I met through Meetup, and she's got such a calming and relaxing voice. We talked about meditation in a lot of detail. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I've done quite a lot before, and just if you listen to that episode, she's a real wealth of knowledge, to be honest. I definitely am having her back on the show soon. She's definitely, it's overdue, her next appearance on the podcast, but we've got so many episodes coming up. We will definitely be making time to bring Shami back on the show. She and I went over stuff we've done for meditation. We contemplated new things. She brought some ideas that I hadn't even heard of, and when I've been receiving feedback in real life about the podcast, this is one of the episodes that actually a lot of people have been drawn to. This is probably the episode I've had the most feedback for out of all of them. And here's just a clip of what Shami had to say about meditation.
It's all about quietening the mind, and it's not too much on the physical. But what you mentioned about the yoga, I think if you practice yoga as well, and then have that awareness of your body, and then be able to practice meditation on top of that, I think it kind of balances it out.
Nice.
You do the body and make it coming to almost like an alignment, and then be able to do the yoga.
That's interesting.
Brings
in both.
And I found doing meditation really easy if you've done yoga. Like if you do a session of yoga, and then because most yoga classes that you could go to tend to have a meditation at the end of the class, which allows you to relax the body and then also calm your mind. So I think that sort of feels like a holistic way of looking at it.
So do you do yoga with meditation?
Not with meditation, but I would say yes, I do yoga.
And I wanted to I was really curious about breathing techniques, because I haven't tried that at all.
There's no technique as such. It's just watching you breathe, like watching yourself breathe. That's it. It's close your eyes. Don't stop breathing, obviously. just
hold your breath.
No, that's the thing, because a lot of people are like forcing your breath or holding your breath. It's not that. Just close your eyes, calm yourself down, and just forget about what is that you're gonna do or not do, and just follow your natural breathing pattern. It's just you're going to inhale and exhale out of your nose. So your mouth is closed, and just concentrate on the tip of your nose so you can actually feel the air moving into your body and then coming back out. So that's all. You just calm your mind to the point where that is the only set of thoughts that you have.
And now I can sleep.
You can fall asleep.
Yeah. No, I can open my eyes now.
No, I think if you because a lot of people do fall asleep when they do meditation.
I've had it once and I fell back off my chair.
Did you feel good or bad for falling asleep?
It's interesting because I feel like for meditation, you should be aware of what's going on, because it's about an awareness of you and what's around you for me. So I think that if you've fallen asleep, you've sort of lost a little bit of your awareness, but in a way it's good because it's calming. So
no, I think you really needed to sleep, because
at that time
you might be lacking of sleep. So I think a lot of people I have spoken to always say, I fall asleep when I do meditation. And I'm like, were you tired at the time? Did you really need to meditate, or did you really need to sleep? And then they most of the time they reply back and said, I should have slept. Probably, maybe. But it's that plays part. So if you do meditation in the morning, I find that you would not have that situation where you'd fall asleep on you.
You see, I preferred to meditate before bed, only because I feel like part of what it does for me is calms me for sleep. Because for me, when I go to sleep, it takes me roughly about 45 minutes to an hour from when I lie down in bed to actually falling asleep.
Oh, wow.
Most nights on average. and meditation makes it easier, it makes it take less time. I don't know. I feel like even if I try and stay completely still when I'm trying to sleep, meditating before sleep makes it a lot easier. But there's a lot that can be said for that, like phone watch chimes and things, and using technology too close to bed. But what I found interesting about what you said regarding breathing techniques, obviously I know people who actually have proper techniques you should try when you meditate.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I will link them in the description because they're not coming to my head.
Okay,
But
that's fine.
a lot of people I know recommend when you meditate, especially the guided ones, the more guided ones, are in through the nose, out through the mouth, but then holding them. So when you breathe in, hold, out, hold. And when you're breathing in, to focus on when it's coming in, sort of right at the back of your nose, right where the air's going in. Because I feel when I focus on that, then I'm really aware of my own breathing. So I'm like, this is the air moving. I'm actually feeling it. I don't know if you share the same.
I think from the breath perspective, yes, I agree. It depends on what gives you the most amount of feeling. I think I might have a bit of an advantage because I've been doing this for quite some time, and I got trained by somebody who, a monk, but it was to concentrate on the tip of your nose.
Now, what I said earlier about finding episodes on my own difficult to record, I didn't have that problem with episode 12 where I spoke about football. That was pretty easy because I can talk for hours about football, and I even put in some clips in that episode from some of my favourite commentary moments within the sport, because there was a period in my life where all I wanted to be was a football commentator, and maybe you can hear a little bit of that within that episode. I love talking about the sport. I kept it quite brief as an episode overall. I could definitely do a follow-up if anyone's interested in hearing me talk more about football. Or if you want to come on the show and talk about football, you can contact the Facebook page at the My Generation Podcast if it is a subject of interest to you. I am a big fan of the passion behind football, the stories behind it. When I first came into radio, I came in through sport, mainly football, and that passion is never going to leave. And maybe you'll be able to tell from just listening to me again how much I love football.
What about, I was going to a new school right as in the transition of when the World Cup was happening, going from one school to the other over that period of summer. And when we would have open days at the school, I do remember distinctly that I was able to connect and talk to people because of the World Cup. It was something that everyone was talking about. And first time being hosted in Africa, the vuvuzelas still ringing loud in my ears. There's such a strong sense of such a big event. It was so different, that World Cup, for me. There was even about the ball that was being used. I remember that it was a different football. There was something about it that made it travel faster, I think, if I remember rightly. So shots were flying in left, right and centre. There was so many outstanding goals. Off the top of my head, I can remember Giovanni van Bronckhorst's 30-yard screamer from the left-back position, a cross goal against Muslera of Uruguay when they went through to the final. Diego Forlan was the top scorer that year in the tournament, and it was just such an amazing summer, a very transitional time for me. That stuck out as such a vivid thing for me. And that was the reason I got involved in sport. I started to see more of what was going on, the competition, the narrative of it, and that love just expanded and grew from there. At the moment, I attend a theatre writing group with the Marlowe, and we recently did a project that sparked my interest in revisiting the idea of talking about football, because our writing teacher, what he taught us about was that football is like a narrative story, and it's part of the reason we love it. It has underdogs, it has an act structure with the first half and the second half, it has drama, ups and downs, transfers, rumours, people moving, real life drama, on the pitch drama, fights, red cards, late goals, big drama. And when I was thinking about it from that perspective, I realised just why we love football, because it's a real, living, breathing narrative story that's chopping and changing. And obviously there is quite a lot of complexity to the world of football. I'm trying to stay on the positive side of it for today's discussion. And I've just always enjoyed that underdog story. I don't know about you, because I remember when I was a teenager in school again, I was watching the African Cup of Nations one year, and it was a year that Burkina Faso really performed to a very high standard. I think it was about 2013.
I hadn't really watched much of the African Cup of Nations before, and my way in was seeing that there was this rising up-and-coming team that were playing well. I remember they had, I believe it was Bernsey, a striker that was playing in Germany, just absolutely tearing it up at the African Cup of Nations. And it was just such a beautiful thing to see. So a nation that traditionally hasn't performed into a super high standard, coming up and showing their worth. I don't even think they won it that year, but I've watched the African Cup of Nations pretty much every year since then. And actually this year, 2019, has been a very, very strong one. Episode 13 now. This was the episode where Dan Inwood, we had cemented him as a regular podcast guest, as a quarterly guest. And here's Dan with his next quarterly edition. This is when we definitely loosened up the podcast a little bit more, took the shackles off, and I felt probably at my most comfortable as a presenter in this episode, because me and Dan felt more conversational. He's probably the closest person to me I've recorded an episode with at the time of knowing them, was this episode with Dan. So we were talking about life-changing moments. We definitely went off topic quite a lot, which you can take as you will. It's a more free-form episode. If you were looking for something very serious about life-changing moments, maybe it's not the episode you liked, because it was very all over the place, but deliberately so, because we wanted to cover quite a lot. But here's just one of the many things we spoke about within that episode.
If I could afford that, that's what I'd be doing right now. As in, literally, instead of this podcast, I'll be out on a 652 stroke somewhere.
But there is this podcast.
But unfortunately, there is podcasting to be done.
People to hear our words of wisdom.
Yeah.
If you call them words of wisdom.
I don't know. I'm a serial hobbyist.
Yeah. Well, what hobbies are you into at the minute, Dan?
At the minute, I'm actually hobby-free. I know. It's actually the first time in my life. I lie. Sorry, I'm into model rocketry again.
God, yes.
Yes. Yeah, that whole thing. So right now, I build and fly model rockets that are, only a couple of feet tall, but pushing the 800 to 2,000 foot range.
Wow.
In flight. Yep. So that's pretty cool. Before that, I've been into model aircraft, building and flying. I was a web developer at one point as a hobby. What else? I did large-scale Connects replicas of stuff.
What replicas did you do?
Architectural. So particularly French Renaissance buildings.
Oh wow, that's really niche.
It really is.
That's a really niche subject. Do you have photos of that anywhere?
Probably.
Dan, would you mind digging up those photos for the listeners?
I will do my best.
Because as a fan of very niche hobbies, that is as and by when I say that I mean Lego collecting of very specific themes,
yes, you do.
Certain custom builds. That would be very interesting to see. And so if it's in the description, people, that means that Dan came back to me. And if it's not there,
it means that this was in the era before decent quality pictures existed.
Yeah, but other hobbies you were saying?
Oh god, clay pigeon shooting, air rifle shooting, precision type, wood turning. So I have been trying to actually get into this into lathe working with wood, and I enjoyed it very, very much. And I did that regularly, always turning bowls, plates, egg cups, snowmen in the winter, whatever cylindrical.
When I met you, I think you were doing that, weren't you?
Yeah, very much so. Unfortunately, right now I don't have a shed or much of a back garden where I live, so that's had to sort of fall by the wayside.
My dad has a lathe. Yeah, but it doesn't really do a whole lot of lathing at the minute. No. Does
he just like to look at it?
Well, no, it's in a garage, but where we used to live, the office that my dad had was basically a converted shed at the back of the garden.
Yeah.
Because we lived in the countryside, so we had more space. And basically, to paint a picture, one half of the office was computers and desks and things. The other half was a lathe.
Nice. Yeah.
So it would distract him regularly.
Yeah, that's the dream. That really is the dream, to have you play in the same place as you have your work.
But he was conscious enough to do both. So he had
sure.
had his bit of both. But yeah, that's a really cool hobby. I mean, along those same lines, I know a friend, Joel, who I could probably try and rope into doing a podcast episode.
Oh, for sure.
You know Joel. He does his blacksmithing as a meetup, which is really cool. And I know...
To be fair, though, that's not a hobby, that's a calling.
Yeah.
That is what he wants to do. Well, that's what he does. And it's what he does for a living.
But what I mean in regards to hobbies is that he does it as a meetup where you can go along and try it.
Oh, sure.
So, I know... True. Again, we'll mention Mitch. I'm going to keep mentioning his name in the podcast because then everyone's going to be like, who's the mysterious Mitch? And then one day when we get him, he'll get 100,000 views.
Absolutely.
Minimum.
That's the plan.
Yeah. At the time of recording, we're sitting pretty on 11 subscribers, dudes.
Cool.
We're saying
We're going to have a live check of the subscription figures, people.
What is Art was up next. Now, when I was on my holiday in Yorkshire, which was an episode that came out 2 weeks after this, I was reading a book called What is Culture, which was very interesting in how it spoke about why we create things. And I'm always obviously quite a big fan of art. I consider this podcast an art form in a sense. I'm very proud of what we do here, and I've been proud of theatre work I've done, photography. I've always been so curious about why we even bother making things as a species. And well, here's what I had to say in this solo episode where I drew on comments and quotes from the book.
You could say wear my heart on my sleeve, and I don't shy away from saying what I'm truly feeling. And I feel like writing is a good place for me to put a lot of that in my plays, whether it's through characters, whether it's through situations, whether it's through specific arguments or successes or conflicts. They're often things that I'm thinking about and situations I've been in. And going back and looking at my old writing narratively tells me a lot about how I used to be. Now, for a lot of people, art may come in the form of things like paintings, and I've always been an appreciator of visual arts, but I've not been an amazing contributor. I can't draw at all. I can only really do any form of visual work through photography and film, and I've always took a more directorial role when it came to film because I like the overall vision. When it comes to art, I like to see the biggest possible picture and work things down into steps rather than being a cog in the machine. I like to oversee the whole machine. I'm definitely someone who, I take it through my murder mysteries that I run solo murder mysteries that I write myself and then present myself, and I run this podcast, and I find that when I'm thinking of my own new ideas and able to bounce them off of people that I work with, it's a lot easier for me to work. I like putting my ideas on a stage. Theatrically, I think it's very, very obvious to me reading my recent plays what emotions I'm trying to discuss and discover, whether they be to do with personal work, my jobs, and just things that humans feel. I think that, and it definitely explores it very well in the book, which I'm going to link to in the description below the book I'm going to be referring to, because it just taught me quite a lot about how we all view art and why it's something that we should be very aware of. The idea of reacting and being emotional to art is very important. The idea of crying at a movie or at a song, or being, and this can be overwhelmed with positive or reflective or negative emotion. Just being overwhelmed by emotion at a piece of art, no matter what medium it's in, is very, very important. The ability to, there's a great example in the book where it talks about a man breaking down in tears at a painting in a museum. Now, do you throw the man out of the museum for the risk of him damaging the artwork, or do you let him feel the art? And I think that's something that now going forward I want to think about when I'm doing my writing. What emotions do I want others to feel? Because my art is now not only, as it has been when I was younger, just a process of me allowing my emotions to paint on a page, but instilling emotions and discussions and thoughts into people that I want to discuss.
And to round off the best of for the first 15 episodes of the My Generation podcast, we went back to Connor Jenkins to talk about the power of music. Now, I said earlier I was really worried that I wasn't going to be getting guests back on the show after this, but straight after I recorded this episode with Connor, I put a quick punt out on Facebook asking for guests immediately after recording this episode, and I received so many messages privately from people wanting to come on the show and share their story, especially as at that point we had a catalogue of 11 episodes for them to listen to at that point. So people could listen to what others had to say, and they didn't have to worry about going first and being on this show because maybe they had a friend who'd been on it and they were more comfortable to come on and share their stories. That's how Tom, George, Megan, we had Connor back on the show. He had a great chat with me about the power of music, one of the longest episodes we've had on the show. We talked through so much. If you go to that episode, you'll have music content to listen to for hours, days, months, years. He's a wealth of knowledge for music. He's a musician himself, and here's what he had to say.
Fair few. I mean, we recently did a show for Hub One Recordings music launch party, because I think, and my very last gig with the band was their opening party. So let's find the new guy's really nice. I know him already, and they've already found a drummer, and he's really lovely. He's a nice guy called Oscars, with an S on the end. It's a strange one.
Very in with the industry now. You've got a lot of contacts with Inside Music, and
yeah, I'd say so. I mean, not as much as some people I know for sure, because I mean, a lot of my friends are musicians. You know, I'm from a small town called Margate, and it's all just musician. But I've got some really close friends who work very big in the industry. There's one guy that I know who he's always been obsessed with music. So I think he posted something on Facebook the other day, and he posted about how when he was 15 years old, he went to his first gig with his dad or whatever, and then it just took over his life. And now he is, I believe, some sort of tour manager or some sort of manager for the band's Dream State. Oh. If anybody on the podcast knows those. Yeah. But I got to go to a gig where they played. It was quite a small gig in Dover, and they played, and then like a few months later they were winning like Kerrang awards and like they're doing world tours and crazy stuff like that. And I was like, damn, that's awesome. And like, my friend Jay, he's the guy that made all this happen, I think. So, and he's just obsessed with it.
Yeah,
he would have been a much better person to have a podcast than me.
Well, you're both passionate people about it, and it rubs off, doesn't it? Because when you're surrounded with people like that, you're gonna be the best drummer you can be. So, what made you pick drumming as the instrument?
Well, I fell into it by accident. I went to a youth centre when I was 13 years old to learn to play guitar, but the guy who taught guitar wasn't in on that day. And they were like, oh, the drum guy's here, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a go. And then I just kind of loved it. I fell in love with it immediately.
What would have happened if the guitar guy had been there that day?
Well, probably the same thing, because I think the very next week I went there, I started playing the guitar, and then I started learning both at the same time.
Okay.
So it's a whole mishmash. But I definitely played more drums growing up as a kid. God forbid my parents. It was. It's definitely my favorite instrument to play. It's just so fun. It was mostly self-taught. I had a few lessons growing up as a kid, but after that I used to listen to Blink-182 and Green Day, and like all day I would just sit in my room with headphones. I was playing along and trying to learn just by like listening, you know.
Oh, so you're not even looking at like sheets. You would just go by the sounds.
I can't read sheet music, dude. No. Not at all.
Because I was sort of the same. Because I used to play the piano, and I was the same. I would listen to things and then just play it because I couldn't look at the.
Yeah, I'm the same.
And like Blink-182, they've got a new album out, haven't they? So.
9, I think, is their upcoming album. It comes out in September, which I am so excited for. I'm the biggest Blink-182 fan on the planet. I've got every album. I've got a signed painting on the wall.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm like proper diving headfirst into the Blink-182.
So I'm a bit like that with Sum 41.
Oh mate, I saw them a couple of years ago. Last year at Reading.
You've seen them?
Yeah, it was so good. Wow. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, I imagine the energy was quite high there.
Oh, you know it.
Yeah.
They covered Faint by Linkin Park.
Really?
The singer from Linkin Park, Mike, he was doing a solo set right before them.
Yeah.
And he came on and they did Faint, and it was like, it was so crazy.
Wow, Sum 41 doing Faint by Linkin Park. That's something I would have liked to have had. That's probably on YouTube somewhere.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think it was actually on the BBC YouTube channel.
Well, I'll have to check that out then.
Do it.
I didn't even know that happened.
So I hope you've all very much enjoyed the brand new look My Generation podcast for 2020. Trying to make strides to keep the podcast new, fresh and updated to what you want to listen to for the new year of 2020. It's a year of transition for the show. We hope to push it in an even more vibrant direction for you and give you more of the stuff you love. If there's anything you want to see on the My Generation podcast, leave it in the YouTube comments below, because I'll be addressing it either in future episodes, or if it's a change you'd like to see on the show, put it down there and we will be going to all of them in very much future episodes, or I'll be addressing them in some way. Thank you all very much for listening. Have an amazing rest of your new year. Don't forget to let me know what you're up to. Stay subscribed to the YouTube page here to see the latest of the podcast, and turn on post notifications so you never miss a new episode of the My Generation podcast every single Thursday at 6 o'clock for the forever. That's confirmed right now. Forever. This will come out every Thursday. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. We'll tune in next Thursday. And we've got a wealth of new topics coming up. We've got Mitch coming onto the show for the first time, Joe, And then, as I said before, Alara, James, Aina, talking about drama. I've got another personal episode that I'm going to be doing with a bit of a twist. Got a lot of those coming up. Hopefully bringing Connor back on the show. And then Alex Kakia, who's going to be talking about a project of hers as well. So many amazing episodes coming up from January and February as well. We're also obviously getting Harry back on the show. And a wealth of new guests as well. So do tune in to the future of the My Generation podcast, because we're shaping it to what you want to listen to. Not only here within the county of Kent, where all of our guests are based, but wherever you are listening to in the world, or listening from in the world to the My Generation podcast. Thank you all very much for listening to this episode. I've really enjoyed your company on this 2nd of January day. It is the new year. I don't want to say new year, new me, because I don't want to be too cliche, but the podcast is pushing forward. Thank you all very much for listening, and we'll see you next week on the next episode of the My Generation podcast. I've been Max Barrett. Thank you very much for listening.